Hi, welcome to this video. So in today's video, I will talk about the installation and basic configuration of R and RStudio on a cloud server. This will actually be an extra chapter in addition to my video tutorial series for R and machine learning tasks. I plan to do several of this type of videos. So for example, like today's video, and I also plan to do one for using Shiny to build interactive web applications, as well as another one for hosting Shiny projects on Shiny server and on Shiny proxy. So the first question for today will be why we need to run R on a cloud server. Well, there are several reasons. For the first reason, the cloud server is highly scalable. Well, basically, it means you can start with a very basic and super cheap one CPU and 2 GB of RAM virtual machine. You can just play with it and try to get a sense of setting up the programming environment in the cloud. And when you are comfortable with doing that, you can easily switch to higher end VMs just through the control panel provided by your service provider. For example, I have been using VMs with 32 cores of vCPUs and 128 gigabytes of RAM. And you can always go for much higher tier machines. You can have a machine with hundreds of cores of vCPUs and even terabytes of memories. So that's one very important feature for using cloud server and virtual machines. So you are not wasting money on resources that you really do not need. It's highly customizable. And for the second reason, it is usually cheaper to just use cloud server. Well, especially you can try to use on-demand machines, or even like spot instance. So you will be billed on a hourly basis, and the price is always cheaper than just get a full running server at your home, or you are trying to build a DIY PC with those high-end components like AMD Threadrippers, or a very expensive NVIDIA Tesla GPU card for performing GPU computation. Also, those high-end PCs and servers, they can always be and be hunger for energies. You also need to pay for the huge electricity bill just for running them at home. Well, I mean, if you are using an on-demand VM or on-spot instance, you can just destroy them when you really do not need to perform any tasks, right? So you are not wasting resources and you are saving money at the same time. For the third reason, and I think it is actually one of the most important thing about cloud server and virtual machines, is that they are actually highly recoverable. You can easily restore the machine back to its initial state just through the control panel, or you can also create several images as backups. So you can just use one of them to restore the machine back to a prior state. Well, like if you are using a server at home or you are using a DIY PC, to do that, you need to manually create the backups to reinstate the system, or sometimes if the system is really badly corrupted, you even need to just to restore it, to reinstall the system by yourself. It costs time, costs energy. It's just really not a good idea to do so. Well, I mean, there are a lot of cloud server providers in the market. Some very famous ones are Amazon AWS with the EC2 instance, Google Cloud, um, DigitalOcean. They offer the droplets. And well, since I'm from China, I also use cloud servers provided by Tencent Cloud and Ali Cloud as well. So there are some basic rules that you can follow when choosing your server provider. The first rule is that make sure the server instance is actually close to your geographic location so you can get good internet access to that machine. For example, if you are living in the eastern coast of the United States, you can always choose a Amazon server located in places like Ohio, North Virginia, and just to find a place that is well close to your residence. And for the second rule, you need to make sure there's no hidden cost. So some providers calculate the cost of virtual machines that include rich CPU and memory RAM, hardware, internet separately. So, well, even if you see the cost for VM for the CPU and RAM is not very high, you always need to add on the total cost of VM hardware and internet connection all together to get your final code. And the final rule is that, well, make sure you are allowed to upload data to the cloud server. Well, especially for people working in the financial sector, there are regulations you need to comply for the security reasons. So those are some things that you need to consider before you actually choose your server provider and to get your virtual machine. Well, so I feel that's some very helpful information for purchasing and setting up the cloud server. Now we can jump into our topic for today. I have already built a VM with Tencent Cloud. It's a Ubuntu VM with Ubuntu 20.04 long-term support system. It has 2 cores of vCPUs and 2 GB of RAM plus 50 GB of disk. To use VM to access it, we need to use a protocol called SSH. We need to have a SSH client installed in our PC and a SSH host in the cloud server. If you are using this with a cloud service provider, it's very likely that they will have a proprietary version of SSH client. You can use that. For example, for Tencent, it is called the Orca term. It has this nice GUI plus some helpful information regarding your system status. If you want to use a open source or third-party softwares, there are many options available online. One of my favorite is actually called Putty. You can download it from putty.org. It's a very nice SSH client for Windows PCs. It has this easy to use GUI, so you can consider to use that as well. So after we log into the system, the default user name for the Tencent machine is actually Ubuntu. That's fine. We can enable the root privilege by typing sudo su. Just be careful when you are in root mode. Do not do something to delete or move the files if you are not sure about the action, because you might corrupt the system to do so. Just take extra precautions. The reason why I prefer to do the setup of R in root is that every packages I install in root will be available to all the other users. So I just need to run the installation and set up for once and for all. To install the base R, you can directly use the apt-get install command in Ubuntu, install RBase. But a problem with this command is that it will try to extract the RBase software from the Ubuntu repository. And it is actually an outdated version. I think it's still in R3.6 or something similar. So it will not be your best move if you prefer to use a more recent version of R. So to solve this problem, we need to first go to the R-Crane website, the comprehensive R archive network. And from here, we can find download and install R, and download R for Linux. So we are on Ubuntu, we click Ubuntu, and now it will instruct you, lead you to install the most recent release of R. So, well, it's very simple. You just copy paste the command, okay? Well, we actually don't need to include sudo because we are already in the root mode, but it won't hurt to include that. So first we update, okay? And this line, so it will install the helper package. And done. And now we verify the key. Good. And we add the R4.0 repository. Well, sometimes it can take some time, depends on your internet connection and your system configuration. Well, now we can run this line just to install RBase and type Y for yes. So it's actually not that hard to use, even though it's in command line mode. You just follow the instructions and type yes or no. It's almost done. But it's actually quite fast installation. And now we have R installed in the system. Just type this capital R to access the interactive R script. So now we can see we have R version 4.3.0 installed. It's actually a very new release. So on April 21st, 2023, it's called Already Tomorrow. Well, that's a good name. Okay, so this is the R interface. We can type Q to quit it. And we do not want to save the workplace image, so no. Okay, so this is a setup for RBase. We can actually run this command to add the current repository. Press enter. It's working on it. You can see from the CPU usage report. Okay, so everything is done. Well, another thing I would like to talk about is about the system dependencies. So to install some R packages, you need to have certain system dependencies installed. I will show you more details, but for commercial systems like Windows and Mac, those dependencies are actually solved by the providers, by Microsoft and Apple already, so you should have no issue to install R packages. But it might not be the same case for Ubuntu. It's actually not that hard to solve for system dependencies. I will show you some tricks to do it. So let's first enter the R script. Let's install a very simple package. Let's do the curl one. Okay, I remember it requires certain dependencies to install. So let's run. It will compile. I suspect this. Oh, it actually worked. Well, okay. So let's try another one. Let's do R my SQL. I think this one will fail because it must require some sort of system dependencies. Oh yeah, so we got this error information here, configuration failed for package R MySQL. So, and let's look to the top. So right here, configure could not find suitable MySQL MariaDB client library. Try installing. So because we are on Ubuntu, we use this Debian option. It tells you we need either this library or this one. So the nice thing about R is that if the installation for a package fails, it's very likely R will provide you some guidance. And you can just follow this. Let's do this one. You can just follow the guidance, and for most of the time, it will solve your problem. So to install the system dependency, we use apt-get install, and we copy paste this name of the system library. Then run this code, type yes. Okay, the installation is finished. Well, let's try to do the installation one more time. So R MySQL. And it worked just fine this time. So basically I made some tests and find out a few system dependencies, the libraries that might need to be installed prior to install the very commonly used R machine learning and analysis packages like tidyverse, XGBoost, Ranger, GLMnet, and MLR. So I will include that in the comment. You can make that as a reference. If you encounter any problem, you can try to install those libraries first. Also, if R fails to provide you with helpful guidance, you can always try to look them up on Google. For example, sometimes R will require, let's quit R first. R will require GCC to compile. So, well, in our machine, GCC is actually pre-installed, so we should have no problem with that. But if you do not have GCC, you need to install that as well as G++. Oh, we actually don't have G++, so let's do that. apt install. Sorry, I mistyped that. Yeah, yes. Yeah, well, I recall that R will not give you a very concise instruction on the GCC and G++ failure if you do not have them pre-installed. So it's always good to check for your GCC version and G++ version before you actually install the R packages. Okay, so that's something about setting up R as the root user. And the next thing we want to do is actually set up the RStudio then. Again, let's search for RStudio on Google and let's refer to let's search for RStudio server actually. We will use the server version, and on Google, we can find the link for POSIT official website. And let's choose Ubuntu. So we are running Ubuntu 20.04, so that's Ubuntu 20. We already installed we can skip this line here. Install our Studio server. First, we need to install the GDB core. Okay, successful, and get the RStudio Debian installation file. Use the wget command and this URL link. Okay, let's type ls to list all the files under the directory so we can find this installation Debian file for RStudio server then. And now use GDB to install the Debian installation file. The good thing of GDB is actually it will try to solve the system dependencies automatically. So it's always good to use GDB to install files. Type yes. It's working. It might take a few minutes to do it. I mean, even on a very powerful machine, it will take some time because I think this installation will only run on single thread. So it doesn't matter if you have, okay, so RStudio server, the service is active, is running now. Well, yeah, because this installation will likely only run on single thread. Even if you have a machine with hundreds of CPUs, it will possibly just take the same amount of time. Okay, so that's the end. So by default, RS server will likely to run, well, will run on port 8787. We can do a quick check if it's installed and running correctly by copy pasting our IP, and the IP, and we will access port 8787. And we can use a username. So we use the default username Ubuntu, right? And the password is loading the GUI. Okay, so everything works fine. We can also check for the library which is installed R&RStudio right here. So basically, if you install packages as root, it will be in the system library. Every other users can access it. Good. So let's do some configurations to RS server then to make it more user friendly. One thing you might notice, it says you will automatically be signed out after 60 minutes of inactivity. It might be a good thing if you are running machine learning codes that could take, hours or days. We can actually try to get rid of this setting from the RS server configuration file. So to do that, we need to first switch to the directory where the configuration file is in. So let's do cd change directory to etc RStudio, RStudio, and enter list files. So we can find there are a few files here, including this R server conf. So the configuration file for RS server. Let's use vim to edit this file. You need to be in root. We are already in root to edit it. So we are in root and use vim R server conf. Okay, so to edit this file, first press I. So the I in your keyboard, so we are in the editing mode. And we need to add a few lines of arguments here. So the first line, auth, timeout, minutes, equal 0. So this will get rid of the time that the 60 minutes limit for timeout. Well, basically the RS server session will never time out. And the second line, auth state, sign in days. We set that to 30, so we will be signing for 30 days. Or you can change to a longer time if you want. And because we can only access RS server from the default 87 port, and some people might be concerned that it's not safe, you can use this command to change the default port. So www port equals, let's see if you want to do, I don't know, 1970, well, 19750 maybe. So it's entirely up to you if you want to change the default port. I mean, if you are only using a VM for a few hours, it might be a concern just to stick to the default 87 port. But if you want to run a machine for a very long time and you are afraid of a potential cyber attack, you can change that by this command. Okay, so well, we will just do those settings for today and press ESC to exit it. And now press column WQ. You will save and exit this file. Good. And then we need to restart the service, the RS server service. Let's do service RStudio server restart. Okay, and let's check if it's up and running correctly. Status service RStudio server status. Okay, so it's active running. Let's refresh our page. Now you can see that line disappeared, and let's log in again. Good, everything seems to be in order then. I mean, just one more thing. I mean, even though I prefer to install the packages, the libraries in the root mode, you can definitely do it for one single user from the RS server session. Just do packages install. Well, let's install. Or for example, if we want to install GLMnet, we can just do it right here. It will be a very similar interface process, just like what we done in the SSH client. One nice thing about setting up R in cloud server is actually we can access the R kernel from VSCode directly in our PC. So to do that, we need to install a R package called language server. So let's do that. This one will take a while because there are some packages that need to be downloaded first and compiled. Well, so during the meantime, you can try to download VSCode first. Actually, you can download VSCode from its official website. So to use VS Code to access the remote R kernel, we need to get our IP, and we need to get our username and password to build the SSH connection from our local VS Code to the remote R environment. Yeah, I will just skip the rest so that I won't keep you waiting. Okay, so we actually get a failure after running the installation of language server. Actually, right here it says XML2 is not installed. So to solve that, we can actually just so let's quit the R script first. We can actually just install the libxml2 the development library in Ubuntu. Okay, let's enter R again. Install packages XML2, and now it should have no error or failures then. Yep. So let's try to install the language server again. Okay, now everything works out. It looks good. We have the language server package installed. Now we can switch our attention to the VS Code client on our PC then. After you open the Visual Studio Code client, we need to first install some extensions to enable us, well, first to connect to the remote server by SSH protocol, and two, to enable us to edit our kernels. So we need to have the remote SSH installed. We can actually just search remote. And if you haven't done so already, you can install this one. And we also need to have, let's see, oops. So we need to have R and R debuggers. Those two extensions installed. And after you have done this part, you go to View, Command Palette. You search for remote and remote SSH connect to host. We need to configure our I have a existing SSH configuration here, but because we are using a new virtual machine, we need to configure it. Config. Let's name it new VM, and we also need to get our IP of this new VM. So IP, and the user will be Ubuntu. We will access it via the default user. Exit, save, and enter the command palette. Again, connect to server, new VM. It will just open this new VS Code window then. So it will open a new VS Code window, and there will be some instructions on the top. So this virtual machine is running on Ubuntu, so it will be Linux. And we just click continue, enter the password. Let's see, password is this one. Enter the password. and you can check the connection on the lower left side right here is opening remote. Okay, so SSH new VM. So we connect to the VM successfully, and can close this. So click File, New File, search for, well, actually, see. Okay, so install in SSH, install R and RDebugger in SSH. If you want to use Python, you can just reinstall everything here, or Docker, or anything, just in SSH. Well, again, file, new file, R document. And right here on the lower right side, it shows R not attached. We click on this one, so it will attach to the R kernel in our remote server then. So it shows right here R version 4.3.0 already tomorrow. Exactly the same as our R on the remote server. Let's just run one line of code here. Let's define a variable x to be 1. Run this and display x. Okay, x1, so everything works out. So this is how you, well, basically this video walks through the steps to find a cloud server provider, to make a purchase, and to install R in the remote server, the virtual machine, to configure RS server, and well, if you prefer to use RStudio IDE, you can access the IDE from the port, the IP with the port you exposed. And if you are okay with using VSCode, you can definitely do this connection, just directly connect to the remote instance from VSCode then.